Pretty much everything I'm about to say is highly controversial. With that said, let me preface all of it with this. I can only control what I say. I cannot control how you take what I say. All right, this time, we the people are right. And I've got confirmation. We're going to take a brief look at history, and we're going to take a hard look at what's going on currently with these drones, orbs, plasmoids, UFOs, abductions. All right? People are coming out of the woodwork with their stories, and I've got some that came in from just last night while I slept that are absolutely airworthy. They need to be heard. Folks are coming to me, literally hundreds of folks a day, emailing the channel at crazylake@mail.com to get their stories out because they want me to be their voice. They can't be their own because they've tried in the past and they've been laughed at. They've been ridiculed. Some of these folks have lost their jobs. Some of them have become estranged from their family, all because they had the courage to speak out on their experiences. Well, why would anybody call somebody who is truthfully speaking of their own experiences crazy, insane? Well, because that's what the powers that be want us to think, and they back up this engineered, by design, thought process they want us to follow by expert opinion. Let's take a brief look at some of those expert opinions and experts' views and techniques of the last century. And of course, I'm talking about mental health, okay? FYI, I am not a mental health specialist. I am not qualified to give mental health advice. What I'm about to read you can be found by doing a simple Google search, just as I did. What did I search? I searched the most ridiculous psychiatric beliefs and treatments the experts used on we the people just in the last century. Let's start out with lobotomy, okay? Lobotomy, this was a surgical procedure involving severing connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex. It was believed to alleviate symptoms of mental illness. While initially hailed as a breakthrough, it was later recognized as highly invasive and often resulted in severe cognitive and emotional damage. Now, here it is, 2024, as of this recording, soon to be 2025. Most of us know about lobotomies, and we think who in their right mind would have been crazy enough to listen to the experts at that time? Well, let me give you one example. Papa Joe Kennedy, okay? The patriarch of the Kennedy family. This was John F. Kennedy's father. Robert Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy Sr.'s father, RFK Jr.'s grandfather, okay? He had a daughter. This would have been John F. Kennedy's sister. Her name was Rosemary. At 23 years old, she received a lobotomy because the experts said it was a thing to do, and one of the most powerful men, the ambassador to the United Kingdom for the United States, John Kennedy, or Papa Joe Kennedy, Joseph Kennedy, rather, had his daughter get a lobotomy. This was kept secret for decades. She would then spend the majority of the rest of her life in a nursing home type facility in Wisconsin, hidden from public view. Now, she would eventually join back up with her family, but she could not communicate past that point. But at the time, the experts said, hey, this is what we do with folks who have mental illnesses, okay? Moving on, insula coma therapy. They would literally and deliberately induce a coma through insulin injections into people. The rationale was that the fluctuations in insulin levels might alter brain function and improve mental health, but it was ultimately ineffective and highly dangerous, not unlike lobotomies. Okay, next we move on to shock therapy. We all know about this, and I'm not going to read you word for word what I found on Google. They pretty much electrocute you, not quite to the point of an execution, but enough to shock the mental illness out of you. Well, you know, there's a form of shock therapy they used for many years before electricity. They would literally dig a deep hole, like a 6-foot deep hole in a field. They would take the mentally ill patient blindfolded for a walk. They'd say, come on, let's go for a walk. I want you to be blindfolded, just hold onto my arm. They would walk with them. They would talk with them, get them at ease, feeling at peace, walk them right into that hole. And these folks would fall into that hole. They would often break limbs. They'd break their legs, their arms. And that shock from that fall and those injuries were supposed to alleviate their mental illnesses. This is what the experts said. The same experts, well, through the evolution of mental health knowledge, or what they think, that are calling us cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because we share our experiences. Trephination. They literally were doing this in the last century. This is when they would drill holes into mentally ill patients' skulls with the belief that the mental illness would just come out of those holes and leave the body. Seriously. Listen, there was like a dozen different ones that come up, but I'm going to jump to number 9 because this explains what's going on from a historical standpoint and from a current standpoint. The misuse of psychiatric labels. Listen, once they realized none of this nonsense worked, they thought, well, let's publicly shame these people. Let's humiliate them. Let's make sure that there is a negative connotation associated with whatever disorder they have or whatever mental illness we deem them to have. So, and particularly, and here's what we're seeing right now, particularly those who challenged societal norms and who voiced dissent. So the powers that be say, oh, there's no aliens, there's no UFOs. All these 90% is what a lot of the talking heads like Dr. Stephen Greer are saying. And I have a tendency to believe with almost everything that guy says. After watching multiple interviews, there's one in which I don't. I'm going to state it again here before this video is over. 90% of these things are man-made, according to Dr. Greer, and approximately 10% aren't. They actually are VT nature. So the powers that be say, oh, well, we don't know what these things are. And if you don't believe that lie and you dissent, we will say you're crazy. Well, there's just too many people coming out dissenting. And so that's why they're doing what they're doing now. A false flag leading up to a false flag that's not going to happen. They're burying the truth, these truths between two lies. I'll get to that again in a minute. Now listen, in recent times, we have become more soft in our society and they've changed a lot of these labels. For example, when I came home from Iraq in 2009, I was told that I had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Then I spent a lot of time overseas, mostly, well, predominantly in the Philippines. And when I came back in 2016, 7 years later, I was told, oh no, you don't have PTSD. There's no disorder about what you have. That's just terrible for people to call you that. And I said, oh really? So what do I have now? They'd say, oh, now you only have PTS. I was like, what's that? Well, you remember post-traumatic stress disorder? Now it's just post-traumatic stress. And I was supposed to feel better about that? Were my symptoms any different? No. But hey, it sounds softer. Here's another one. This is one I like. What we used to call sociopaths. Sociopaths are now called people with antisocial personality disorders. Well, because when we hear of someone that has antisocial personality disorder, we're led to believe, oh, they just don't like crowds or they just don't like being around other people. Because God forbid, we think that they lie, they're manipulative, they take advantage, they lack empathy, and lead completely self-centered lives. But, they're not sociopaths anymore. They're folks who have antisocial personality disorder. A rose by any other name, still a rose. All right, comes now, based upon this misuse of labels, big brothers and the powers that be. Whatever you want to call those who are going through great efforts to control the narrative. What's the greatest term they use on folks like us? Conspiracy theorists. Let me tell you the history of that term, that label that goes back to the number 9 most ridiculous mental health treatments or abuses of the last century. The misuse of psychiatric labels. Let's call them something that has a negative connotation and they'll shut their mouths if they're dissenting. So this term conspiracy theory, when did it come out? The FBI came up with this term shortly after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. They put out their narrative, what they wanted people to think. Hey, this is what happened, don't question it. But too many people question it because they did hear, many that were there, shots coming from the grassy knoll. Things weren't adding up. They couldn't connect the dots as they were told. So Big Brother comes up with the term conspiracy theorist. Well, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? Like they're saying about the folks who have had experiences with drones, orbs, plasmoids, aliens, abductions, all these encounters. You're just nuts. Well, guess what? People shut their mouths. Now, what was there some genius in the FBI that was able to come up with this? No. Let me tell you, Big Brother pays attention in such a way that 97% of the population doesn't. They got this idea from the previous decade when Wisconsin Senator, a Republican, Joseph McCarthy, went on his witch trial of the last century. It's known as the Great Red Scare. Senator McCarthy was an anti-communist crusader. And he started accusing people. The first accusation came from my native home state in West Virginia, Wheeling, West Virginia, when he said he knew all these people working in government who were communists. Well, guess what? That terrified everybody working in government, because back then, the last thing you wanted to be called was a communist. Well, he went out and he started naming his personal enemies as communists, and they were brought in front of House Judiciary committees because they were guilty until proven innocent, which never happened, because once they were accused, and we see this today, we hear that in our legal system, and it's not a justice system. I had a lawyer explain this to me once, because often there is no justice. There's just a law, and by the way, the law works if you can afford for the law to work in your favor, which means if you can afford to hire a very good attorney. If you can't, hey, if you got a public defender, and hey, hope you're not claustrophobic and you're not shy of small spaces for some time. And I think most of you are picking up what I'm laying down. So anyway, even then President Harry S. Truman, who knew McCarthy was nuts, would not speak out against him to get this Red Scare to go away, because even President Truman was afraid that McCarthy would label him as a communist. Folks, these are all facts. I challenge you to fact check me, brah. Google everything I'm telling you, okay? I'm one of the 3% that pays attention. I've been paying attention for more than half a century. All right, so that's where the tactic came from. Now listen, I'm going to advance to modern times. This is where I'm going to say some things that are very controversial. Again, I can only control what I say. I cannot control how you take what I say. Let's look back over the last few years at the Black Lives Matter movement. Yeah, I'm bringing that up. Here's what I'm bringing up about it. And by the way, this is a conversation I have had with many Black Americans. And 100% of these folks I've had this conversation with agree with me 100%. A couple of them, it's funny, I was getting a haircut one day, my barber, Black man, we had this conversation. He jumped up and down with joy. And he told me that he and his friends and relatives in the Black community have been saying the same thing. By this time, we were a few years into the Black Lives Matter movement, and I was the first white person he'd ever heard say it. What is it? It's this. You go to the protests, you go to the rallies. A lot of times, the majority of the folks you see are Caucasian people. They're white people, and they're holding up signs that say, "Hate has no home here." And I completely agree with that. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. In my mind, there is but one race, and that's the human race. Well, potentially extraterrestrial races as well. My wife's Asian, my son's biracial. I love everybody except people that are, what's short for Richard? Think about it. I don't like those people. I don't care. They can look like me and think like me and live like me, but if they're a-holes, I got no room for them in my life. So anyway, I'm sure in my heart of hearts, because as cold and calloused as I might be at times, I do have a bit of humanity left in me. I truly believe most of those folks holding those signs saying, the Caucasian people, the white folks, hate has no home here, Black Lives Matter, I do believe they did believe those things. However, the number one motivating factor, I believe they were speaking out on behalf of that movement, and the reason they were attending those rallies is because they didn't want people pointing the finger at them and accusing them of potentially being racist. It's that simple. Most of you know it. Most folks would never speak those words because they're scared. I'm not. So if For example, if I'm out there saying, oh, I'm not the one that's racist, I'm not the one that's racist, it's all those other people that look like me and live like me that are racist. Well, that deflects people pointing fingers at me. Now, get this, and yeah, this is controversial. In their efforts to show and to prove that they don't hate minorities, okay, they created another minority that it's perfectly okay to hate. Country folk. Rural whites, and particularly and predominantly post-middle-aged rural white males. Yes, where do most of the people in this country live? White, black, Asian, Latino, any race, any creed, any religion, any gender identification, any sexual orientation. Where do most of the people live? In the cities. So, let's say, for example, you've got a Caucasian man that might have some warped views. Maybe this person, or maybe it's a woman, they look down upon people who don't look like them. Well, hey, how easy is it to shout from the top of their city building, hey, I can't be one of those racist people because I'm an urban Caucasian male or female or whatever. It's those country folk, particularly those post-middle-aged rural white men. They're the enemy. And that ball has been picked up and ran with across multiple goal lines. It's been adopted by a certain political party, many folks within that party, the mainstream media. Oh, they love it. Gives them someone they can look down on and not be called terrible things for doing it. Now, moving on. So, listen. After a century of asinine mental health treatments, where the experts were able to convince, because they had a couple initials behind their name and referred to themselves as experts, they could convince people as powerful as the patriarch of one of the most powerful political families of the last century to basically induce brain damage upon one of their own children. Asinine. But they learned through doing it, they can also control the masses through mislabeling what is not and through fear. Okay? Hence what's going on now. Burying the truth, and this goes back to my theory. I shared it with you just yesterday morning, and it seems to be pretty popular. Right now, a lot of folks who are trying to make sense of the drones which are not being explained, the plasmoids, the orbs, all these things, people coming forth with their abduction encounters. They're claiming that there's this thing called Project Bluebeam, and I've read all about it. They're claiming that this is a build-up to a false flag event, and I even received a very lengthy and well-written email just last week from somebody who claims to be in the know, former government, somebody that advised the government in high positions, claim there's going to be this event to prevent the peaceful transition of power in the upcoming inauguration on January 20 of next month, as of this recording, so that the current administration can implement martial law and therefore remain in power. And even Dr. Stephen Greer is saying this. He said in that interview with Fly on the Wall with Dana Carvey and David Spade that it's going to be the biggest, most revealing event in human history. He says there's a whistleblower that's going to come forth, and this is what's going to open the floodgates of this event. This is the part I disagree with. This is my theory. They are the build up to this event that is not going to happen. That's the false flag. Okay, the first lie is we don't know what these drones are. We don't know what's going on. I call BS. The truth are the stories, some of which I'm about to read you, and then the other lie is the false flag isn't going to happen. Because it's happening right now. Once again, our masters, the powers that be, they are attempting to control the masses, and what does that word become when you take that M off? That's why I don't follow them. Through fear. Through fear. Well, it's not going to work. It is not going to work. They want to shut people up because here's what's going to happen. When that false flag doesn't take place and upcoming President Trump is sworn in and a transition of power takes place just like it did last time, despite some other people's efforts to keep that from happening, it will happen again. The transition of power. Then the powers that be are going to come out and the experts are going to come out and they're going to say, see, we told you. Those people were cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. They saw hobbyists flying their drones. They saw regular civilian and commercial aircraft, and they thought it was something it wasn't. See, we told you. We told you. What's that do? That discredits the people that have these stories based upon actual factual experience. And once again, these folks are going to feel as if they have no place to go. But they do. Here, this guy, Crazy Lake. I will be your voice on this platform, Homesteading Off the Grid on YouTube, because I don't care. I've been discredited a million times. I've been called cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs a million times. I've lost everything. My first family, my mental health at times, my physical health. Deployed to combat, Iraq, 6 months in the Army hospital after that. Told I would never be able to run again, and I'd be lucky if I walked without pain. I ran 5 miles yesterday, and after I make this video, I'm going to run another 5. Okay, I spent years in the Philippines, some of which I had no running water, no electricity, cut off from any friend or family member I ever had, left for dead. But I didn't just survive, I thrived, and I'm back, and I'm your voice. You send me your stories, and I'll tell them. After Inauguration Day, when everybody's saying, nope, see, told you, you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, you come here, I will keep you anonymous if you want me to. These stories, these truths that they're trying to hide between two lies will get out. I'm going to read you just a few that came in last night while I slept. The first one comes from Frank Family Homestead. She writes, "Hi, fellow homesteader. My son and I, about 2 weeks ago, were outside taking care of livestock and cleaning stalls. Even though we homestead, my son and I both must work basically to keep the homestead running. Unfortunately, my husband is disabled, and it's too hard for him to do stalls. So at dusk, my son and I heard 2 military helicopters with no lights on at all, flying low. As we were standing right at the barn door, he, the son, is looking up into the trees and the sky. I'm looking through the open spots in the field, and I yelled, 'Look,' and I pointed in between the trees, and we both watched 2 drones lift straight up off the airfield. The lights on the drones were so bright, it's hard to describe, and the sound of the drones are even harder to describe. I told my son, no one will believe us, because to tell the truth, I can't believe what we saw. But we watched these drones for over an hour, and my son started picking out more in the sky. They flew in a grid pattern. As we got on Facebook later that night, the sheriff's department tried saying there was a woman missing at West Branch State Park, and drones were sent to look for her as well. Now get this, pay attention. West Branch State Park is nowhere near my property or where the drones and the helicopters were. If I can find the post from the sheriff's department post, I will send that to you. Thanks, but it's not necessary. I completely believe you, as do the majority of our viewers. I live in Trumbull County, Ohio. It's almost like they were trying to gaslight us. Gee, you don't say. My dogs and livestock have been acting weird lately, and both my husband, son, and I have been sick lately and very moody. I truly don't know what's going on. We are so laid back, we would remind you of a family of hippies, but ever since those 2 drones flew with all those others, my son started pointing out that my family is different and we don't know why. Sorry for such a long email, the Frank family." Hey, no apologies necessary. You told your story. You told the truth. We believe you. And after Inauguration Day, once President Trump is sworn into office again, and the powers that be and the experts are calling people like you crazy and others who have had those experiences, we will still believe you, and you will still have a safe haven in this channel. Okay? Me as your voice. Call me what you want. I don't care. Just don't call me late for dinner. Okay, so that was in Ohio. The second email comes from Muhammad in Egypt. Okay, this isn't just an East Coast U.S. thing. Muhammad writes, "When I was a child in 1996-97, at 11:30 p.m., while playing with my 3 friends, I saw 3 things, but all without any sound. Later, when I went to high school, I learned that humans see and hear in a range of frequency." Okay, so he's starting to think, well, maybe that explains it. What he saw was, he says, "I saw a pair of lightning rockets, but only the light. They came from the ground in front of me, 2 by 2 by 2, and so on for like 4 minutes in specific coordination. But their speed wasn't that fast. So it's as if they're just rising in pairs of 2s for like 4 minutes. After that, there were some incomplete objects I saw. Something like green jelly, something like the orange orbs that we're seeing these days." Folks, this is going back to 1996, 1997. These orbs would climb their way into the air slowly and go down, then 2 seconds later up, and then back down for 3 seconds, and then back up, and then they hovered in the air for a few seconds. Then the last thing I saw with my friends was a huge area with agricultural lands. I saw an alien spaceship. It was far away in the sky, but really huge. There was a soft light surrounding that UFO, and to know the shape of that ship, it was like a pyramid. So he sees this pyramid-shaped ship over an agricultural field. Mohammed, thanks for your email. Next, we have Rich from Cincinnati, Ohio, another person in Ohio. So folks, it's not just New Jersey that's getting a lot of these activities. Something's up in Ohio. Gee, Wright Air Force Base is there. Isn't that where they took the craft they found from Roswell? Just saying. My name is Rich. I am an Army veteran. Rich, thank you for your service. Hooah, brother. I was an E5. I was in from 1987 to 1992. I have sleep paralysis on a fairly regular basis. I have worked as a special education teacher now for 30 years. So this is a credible, educated professional. Not only is he a veteran, but he's a teacher. Okay? When I experience this, sleep paralysis, I'm always in fight mode with something. In fact, something or someone during a bout of sleep paralysis called me an earth warrior. It's definitely not like your typical dream or even your random nightmare. Does sleep paralysis have a connection to NHI? And again, I should have Googled that. I'm not familiar with that term. But I did just yesterday an entire video on stories about sleep paralysis being related potentially to abductions or visits in the least. Rich continues, I am of German heritage. My mother is 100% German. I also have hazel eyes, as do I. If that even matters. Interesting story about the first sergeant, and I totally believe it. And that was from First Sergeant Stormy yesterday, and I totally believe her story as well. Any chance you can provide me with some insight? If it matters, I never really paid attention to any alien conspiracies until right around the time of the Little C. Now, I don't know what mood social media is in today, so I can't come out and say the name of that. I have to call it the Little C, or I could potentially be canceled. Social media is very moody and very fickle. We all know what Little C is, right? Okay, so never questioned it till around the time the Little C started, and then things just started clicking for some odd reason that I cannot explain. Almost as if I woke up to what is happening. Please return my email, thanks. Rich in Cincinnati, Ohio. And folks, FYI, I'm not returning emails because I don't care. Clearly, if I didn't care, I wouldn't have read your story. I'm literally getting hundreds a day. I simply don't have the time. Okay, but I am going through my best efforts to get your stories out here. And that's part of not returning your emails. Instead of spending time returning emails, I want to come out here and read them to the folks, okay? So, here's the last one. We're going to wrap it up with this. Trying not to take up too much of your time, but these messages are important. They have to get out. Hello, Kevin. I do not wish to share my full name. Just Jay is fine. Listening to your channel has been interesting for me because it has brought up an old event I had swept under the rug years ago. This would have happened around 1991 when I was about 13 years old. So she's a little younger than me. I was 17 in 1991. I was in Merrifield, Minnesota, staying over at my friend's house. It was around dusk in summer, and we were walking through a field from her grandma's house back to her house. It was a country setting and nobody was around. While in the middle of a field around the size of a soccer field, she noticed a white light sitting at the top of the tree line. We both watched it, and it slowly started moving towards us into the middle of the field. It stopped right above us and just hovered perfectly still. I remember vividly it hummed like a refrigerator. It was a small black triangle with a light on each corner, one white, one green, one red. We stared up at it, sitting directly above us for what felt like ages. Then suddenly it roared off so fast and it was gone. The experience was so strange we did not talk about it for years. In Minnesota, I had heard many strange things in the sky as a kid and had always heard my parents' friends talking about their own sightings over their cornfields, etc. Was it extraterrestrial or government? I don't know. I have since moved south and have not had any encounters since, but your show has brought back that strange evening to the forefront of my mind. Thanks for your unique channel, Jay. Jay, thank you for your message. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. And folks, listen, I'm going to be back soon with a fresh round of these experiences. And I'm telling you that this time, we, the people, are right. We're not buying the lie that they're using to hide the truth between the other lie. The first lie being that they don't know what's going on, because they do. The truth being these real life experiences too many folks have had. And then the other lie being this false flag that's going to happen before Inauguration Day to keep the transition of power from taking place. It's not going to happen, folks. And I'm the only one saying it. I'm the only one keeping a level head in regard to this issue. I know there's some folks out there, some experts with doctorate degrees, medical degrees. They've got a lot of initials behind their name that I don't. So why am I taking the opposite bet that they are? I might not have all these advanced degrees from highly priced name tag universities, but while I've been here for more than half a century, I've been paying attention. Send me your stories, crazylake@mail.com. See you for more next time.